Greetings, welcome back to the channel. This is Kaga. The last carrier replay I uploaded for the whole show onto this channel was all about basic carrier gameplay. This time I'd like to highlight the basic strike anatomy for torpedo bombers, basic map awareness and reading as far as carrier drivers are concerned, and the basic mindset for carrier gameplay, that is, how to approach games in general. As you can see, we're on a standard battle on the map New Dawn, and you can see that I'm divisioned up with a cruiser and a battleship. Now you could make the argument that we should have swapped out the battleship for a destroyer to gain some advanced knowledge on how the enemy was deploying, but the battleship in this case offers a degree of flexibility in terms of the health pool of the entire division and allows us a certain amount of flexibility in the situations we can engage in, provided we stay within the limitations of the battleship. So that being said, I can say in hindsight that perhaps the destroyer would have actually been the better choice because of how I like to play carriers. And this leads into our discussion for a basic carrier mindset. If you listen to most of the Worlds of Warships sources, you may believe that there is a rock, paper, scissors relationship between the various classes, where there's a hard counter present to each class in the game. I don't necessarily believe that this is a true statement in practice, and that we should be hesitant to use this in-game all of the time. And I say this because much like World of Tanks and many other online shooter games, we usually find ourselves into situations where that isn't necessarily the case. And you're probably sitting there wondering, well, what do I mean? They designed the game to kind of be this way. But then they introduced RNGesus into the game, which means that in a combination with luck and skill, that will tend to determine the victor of any given engagement. This means that, unlike the classical Rochambeau model of the game, the current meta is all about playing for time and position. This makes thinking about carrier gameplay particularly interesting because most people approach battle with a set piece, almost combinatoric fashion, much like chess, when a more appropriate way to view the battle, at least in World of Warships, is more analogous to the Asian game Go, in which you tend to vie for position rather than straight knocking out of the enemy warships. So getting back to the game at hand, right now you see me maneuvering my fighter groups here to try to provide some air support for my division mates there, particularly the one in the Myogi, although it appears the enemy was actually dropping against our Kuma, and the combined efforts of our fighters and the local anti-air artillery were able to pick up the entirety of that squadron and prevent damage to allies. So now you see me vectoring in. I'm evaluating these two targets, trying to figure out who is the more opportune target, and I'm ignoring those misplaced friendly torpedoes. And here we are, there's a New York class battleship and an Omaha class cruiser, and I see that my planes will have to overfly the Omaha's AA screen for a longer period of time if I engage the New York, so I make my target the Omaha, and we get a pretty pathetic drop on there, get 2 hits, but we force him to use his damage control ability to put out the flooding, and as a result, he's dropped down to below half health, and it becomes apparent that once that Omaha is sunk, this New York will quickly follow. For this reason, I'm already planning my next move out to send my bombers, once they're rearmed, to engage the New York. In the meantime, we'll join my fighter squadron here as they proceed north to provide air cover again for my division mates and the Myogi and the Kuma against the Houshou, the enemy Houshou's torpedo bomber squadrons. It looks like one is going to get the drop off before the fighters get there, but our battleship looks like he's in good shape. Manages to avoid that spread of torpedoes. Yep, avoids them, and looks like the Ride of the Valkyries is about to descend upon these enemy bombers before they can get their torpedoes off. And even if they do get them off, they will be spread so wide it isn't going to matter. Oh, it looks like the enemy Kuma is going to claim our battleship. Ooh, gonna have to do something about that. And right now, this would have been a perfect time to disengage my fighters before they got locked down by the enemy float plane and the AA, but that's hindsight. That is a lesson that carrier drivers everywhere should take to heart, is know when you need to disengage your planes from a particular course of action. The reason being that if you hesitate too long or don't act fast enough, whichever is the case, you are very likely to lose the entire flight, and it doesn't really matter at high or low tiers. Every plane counts. So right here, I managed to plant, well, one torpedo. I kind of hoped that that second one would have finished him off, but not much we can do about that. So I swing squadron number 3 around, order the attack, only to have allies finish him off before I can disengage them. Again, slow reflexes. So at this point, I see that our Langley is being fighter camped by the enemy Langley. So first thing I do is set my AA guns to focus down that fighter squadron when they get the chance, and then launch fighters to engage them. And 2 versus 1 fighter squadrons is already a bit of a landslide victory. And having decided to engage our fighters over what amounts to 2 floating AA parks, this engagement could have only gone one way. So right now we've been detected and we are being engaged by the enemy Kuma. So we are putting all steam towards the edge of the map, try to get some extra distance, and then going to turn swiftly to the east and try to stick with the Langley, recognizing the threat is not going to come from the northern side of the island because of that large group of ships around I-6 that they'd have to fight their way through. I dispatch my bomber squadrons to the southern end of the island to try to catch them when they come around the cape. And right now I'm vectoring in these bombers to try to engage this Kuma, and we're trying to get a good line on target when an opportunity target strikes. So I swing them out, back in for a good torpedo run on the Samson, because if I let him get away, he will destroy us. So he is priority target number 1. So I swing Squadron 3 out after Squadron 4 has made their run to try to buy time for the Kuma to get past the hull of the Samson, which while it's sinking can still block torpedoes in the water, and get them off in the water. And right before they strike, Rommel's picks up the kill, and, well, good gunnery to him. I hope that this little short engagement illustrates that the carrier driver, more than any other player on the team, must keep track of every level of the battle, and their map awareness and their ability to read the map, not only for the tactics that the enemy is likely to employ, but the overall strategy of their place within friendly battle lines, is so critically important to success in utilizing the strength of carriers, especially for Japanese carriers with their high versatility in comparison to the US carriers. So right now you see that I'm vectoring in my fighters to engage, and once again we have gone with the 2 versus 1 strategy with friendly AA park assistance, and we slaughter those enemy fighters and then have just enough ammunition to vector in on the remainder of the enemy Langley's torpedo bombers, and we'll have some of that, please. Nothing quite like ruining torpedo bombers' days with fighters, right? But right now you see him hesitate, and oh no, he got the drop off, but looks like only one got into the water, so it was an automatic drop, and his bombers planted them straight into the island, or at least 2 of them into the island on the drop, so they did not begin to go into the water. So right now I'm going to stick with Squadron 3, and you see right here the basic strike anatomy for dealing with a Japanese battleship. You vector in at a slight angle off of the normal from the vessel, that is a line extending from the vessel at 90 degrees from the center of the hull, and we get an off angle towards the stern of the vessel, and you can see that we can easily get that 3rd torpedo strike on there. Now this isn't always going to get you 3 or sometimes 4 strikes with your Japanese torpedo squadrons, but it will increase your chances of getting those. So right now you can see that our adversaries are still using their automatic drops because of the distance that they're choosing to engage. And it's a good thing that they did, because otherwise the fighters would have torn them to pieces before they got those torpedoes off. So it's unfortunate that our fighters ran out of ammunition on that last torpedo bomber. So right now, if you're paying attention, you would have vectored that last torpedo bomber that survived back towards probably, what, B8 or so. But I have my suspicions that the Houshou is not there based on where the torpedo bombers originally came from. I suspect that the carrier over there that has just become visible is the Langley. So right now we're vectoring in on the Ishizuchi with our torpedo bombers, and they're getting engaged by fighters, but tail gunners reduce them by 1. I had made this maneuver right here that you're seeing, hoping to get that 3rd one off in the middle, and as you can see, that is a very bad strike on my part. I probably should have recalled them, considering my fighters had just come up. And seeing that this strike had gone awry, I instantly vector my fighters out to meet the enemy fighters in the air, as this bomber squadron is valiantly trying to return to base. And then under fighter cover, the other torpedo bomber squadron I have is being vectored in to re-engage the Ishizuchi. Again, this engagement, as seen from my perspective, really does illustrate the need for carrier drivers everywhere, doesn't matter whether you're on my team or against me, to evaluate whether the engagements that they're trying to get their fighters into, or even their bombers, is worth losing them for. You better know the length of time that it's going to take to disengage your planes if you want them to survive long enough to do damage throughout the battle. And that's one of the more, I guess, economic reasons that a carrier driver should be cautiously aggressive throughout the battle, and that is to maintain their strength, their a strike strength throughout the battle. And you can see that again, I'm beginning a rather basic on the normal strike pattern It's kind of a shame, though, that we didn't pick up that kill. 63 damage. I want a refund on that torpedo. But that's not important here. So you can see on the minimap that I have moved my carrier almost to the front lines, or where I suspect the front lines are, and it's now just the enemy Houshou. In best practice, I decide to turn into the enemy cap just in case we cannot find him in 5 minutes. That's a bit of a stretch, but well, weirder things have happened. So now trying to finish off the last of the enemy torpedo bombers, I suspect, because it's just one plane. Yep, and we pick that one up. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Wait, do fish fly? Let me know in the comments. Do you think fish fly? So I have my suspicions based on where that torpedo bomber squadron emerged, that he's somewhere along the northern part of 1-2 lines. So I vector my one ready squadron of torpedo bombers in that direction, and we spot the enemy carrier and begin a vectored strike. This is going to be another basic format strike. I'm just trying to do two things. One, get 1 or 2 hits and possibly coax him into using his damage control ability. Once again, we're coming in on the normal to the enemy Houshou, and our bombers get their torpedoes off. He begins to turn in, and one of those torpedoes, which should have been a hit, sails right under his rudder. Kind of sad on that one. But looks like we managed to coax out the last of his fighters, and thus we rule the air. And right now, we're going to keep these fighters nearby to keep the enemy carrier spotted. This does 2 things. The first, it allows both our allied Langley and myself to better plan our bomber strikes that are about to hit this Houshou. And the second thing, it allows some of our longer range battleships to ponder striking this Houshou if they have a line of fire. Did I say line of fire? I meant a shooting solution. Sorry. So once again, we're now vectoring in our bombers. This one is going to be a little bit more of a off the normal vectored strike. And as you're going to see, we plant it just at a slight, maybe about 15-degree angle from the normal, and we're going to pick up 2 hits and cause flooding. So he is going to use that damage control ability if he hasn't already used it. So with the enemy Houshou on such low health, I decide to steam out of the cap. Sorry, I've got a little bit of bloodlust right now. I want to see him sink. So with the fast turnaround on our bombers rearming, we have Squadron 4 up in the air again, and we see the Langley, well, our Langley, has vectored in his torpedo bombers. It looks like he's going to go for the easier hit on the opposite side of the Houshou because he's caught in a turn, and there's only so many ways he can go. I'm going to go for a more interesting approach. I'm going to try to catch him as he turns out. It's a bit of a gamble, but we'll pick it up here, and you're going to see the basic anatomy of how this type of strike works. And it works similarly to the off the normal shots that I just demonstrated, but you're going to see that we catch him right in the midships, and that it's a little bit harder of a shot to pull off because they can actually turn into it. This is not a particularly great result in the Houshou with only 13 torpedo hits, but with a wise use of the fighters, we were able to pick up 23 planes, and with wise usage of our bombers, we were able to sink 3 vessels and cause 9 floods, and pick up a little over 2,500 experience for what looks like the first win of the day. So it's a little surprised that we managed to top the team lists in terms of experience earned, and it looks like our friendly Langley was keeping pace with the same number of planes shot down, so well played to him. It looks like my division mates could have had a slightly better game, but I'm not here to critique them. Thanks for playing, guys. You were certainly there when we needed you to head off the enemy push there long enough for the carriers to get out of dodge. Thank you. And that's something I think a lot of people could learn from in this replay is that wise play from your surface ships can really change the outcome of a game. I can easily imagine, and it probably isn't a stretch of the imagination for anybody, that if my division mates weren't exactly where they were for as long as they were, both of our carriers probably would have been lost to that Samson that we managed to take out midway through the match. And I say this is not a particularly fantastic result in the Houshou, but not about 94,000 damage, nothing to shake a stick at. Certainly put the hurt on the enemy, even though some of them were quite low health when we did manage to pick up their kills. So my plans for the next carrier replay I'm going to upload is probably going to be a USS Langley replay. I'm going to need to record that. It should be available in the next 2 days. I think I've got some World of Tanks test server footage for the Tier 8 Japanese heavy tank, the Oho, that may come up before then. We'll see. I'd like to once again thank everyone for watching thus far. If you like this content, or would like to see more content of this nature, please consider subscribing to the channel. And once again, good day.